Welcome to Around the Empire. I'm your host, Joanne Leon, and our co-host tonight, this is a Swapcast, is Kyle Anzalone. This is a fully independent podcast. Now more than ever, independent media needs the support of our listeners and viewers. Visit the website aroundtheempire.com to find out how to support the podcast and gain access to the bonus content. And there are both audio and video versions of this show that you can find on various platforms. In most cases, the video version has some added images and enhancements you might want to check out. Our guest today is Teodrose Fikremariam, and this is an in-depth discussion of the civil war in Ethiopia. Teodrose is the co-founder and editor of the Ghion Journal and the host of video shows on the Ghion Journal video channel. Originally from Ethiopia, he's a published author, a prolific writer, a consultant in the defense industry, and a former community organizer and political activist. We recorded this on December 16th, 2021. Welcome to Around the Empire. This is a swapcast between Around the Empire, and we have Kyle Anzalone, the host of the Conflicts of Interest podcast, and we have a special guest, Teodrose Fikremariam. And we are really happy to have you. It's great to see you again. First off, Teodrose,
Thank you, Joanne. I appreciate you.
And your perspective. You know what? If you would, we should probably start out with just a little bit of background. You did that already in the first podcast you did on Around the Empire, but
Sure.
You know, since this is your homeland, I mean, I think it's important for you to tell us about this.
So my name is Teodrose Fikremariam. When I back when you interviewed me, it was Fikre. That was kind of just short. But my dad's full name is Fikremariam. So in Ethiopia, we take our father's first name as last name. So in honor of my dad, even though legally my name is Fikre in America, it's really Fikremariam. So I just kind of did that as paying homage to my dad. I'm originally from Ethiopia. I came here when I was 7 years old. Came here, it wasn't a vacation when I came here. We were forced to flee. So there was a Marxist government that overthrew the king of Ethiopia back then. In fact, the same year that I was born, a month before I was born, there was a coup d'etat. They came in promising hope and change. Sound familiar? Next thing you know, within a couple of years, 500,000 Ethiopians were dead. So my parents felt compelled to protect us and to provide us a future of at least a modicum of opportunity, as opposed to who knows what's going to be happening in Ethiopia. We left and we came here as immigrants, and I arrived in America in 1982 at the age of 7, and here I am. No Ethiopian accent to speak of, but I nonetheless love Ethiopia because that's where I trace my roots to.
So I'm going to actually ask you, Kyle, where you think is a good place to start with this, because you've been following this situation and this conflict more closely than I have for longer than I have. So I'm going to let you start out, if you don't mind, is where you think is a good starting point for this.
Well, Joanne, thanks so much for inviting me to this conversation, because I have tried to cover Ethiopia and the Horn of Africa in general on my show, but I find it kind of difficult because typically the best news that you're going to get in English is just like the press release from the official sources. So saying that this many people died in this area and it was a war crime committed by this side, but I mean, what the hell do they know? It doesn't seem like they're really there on the ground. And, what the hell does it tell me to read this? I guess maybe where I would start is that Abiy Ahmed, won the Nobel Peace Prize after making a deal with Ethiopia, or with Eritrea, excuse me. And I guess at the time I had covered that on my show, and I really didn't know what to think of it, but I did note that there were people in the north of Ethiopia, the Tigrayans, who were upset about the deal, feeling like they had been cut out. And so then when the conflict started again, or maybe not, I don't know, but at least in the Western media, like November 2020, when it started again, my initial interpretation was, here's another guy who won a Nobel Peace Prize, put around his neck, cut a deal with a neighboring country, and then used that as cover to launch a war against his political enemies. And so I'm not saying that's what happened, but that was kind of my initial impression. I just wondering what you think of all that and kind of Abe.
Sure, the complete opposite. So initially, when the conflict occurred, it was actually November 4th of 2020. The TPLF. Let's kind of put the record straight. TPLF are heinous. I don't know what else to call them except what they are, which is a terrorist group. They've ruled Ethiopia with an iron fist for 27 years, and their regime. It might not necessarily rival, like for example, Pol Pot in terms of body count, but in terms of viciousness. In fact, I mean, they were listed by the State Department as a terrorist group. And Ethiopians rightly fled Ethiopia for tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands left Ethiopia because of the amount of repression that was taking place. Meles Zenawi was a through and through dictator. And by the way, what a lot of things that the analysis that's left out is that they were propped up by the West to begin with. In the London Conference in 1991, the TPLF were given a mandate by the likes of Herman Cohen and Zbigniew Brzezinski to do exactly what they did, which is to splinter Ethiopia, to basically implement apartheid 2.0. And what the Italians could not do at the Battle of Ottawa in 1896, what they could not do again in the 1930s, they were able to. The imperialists were able to do by foisting tribalism upon Ethiopia. The reason that Ethiopia was never colonized was because we're united. We didn't look at ethnicity. We looked at nationality. We looked at the fact that we're all human beings for a very long time. We've had our challenges, but you go to an Ethiopian restaurant, nobody said, "Are you Tagaru or are you Amara? Are you Oromo?" First thing I would say is "Enibla," as in let's eat together. It was a very communal country, and that type of tight knitness is what prevented us from being colonized. Well, they realized the best way to colonize us is through our own people. So TPLF, Tigrayan People Liberation Front, that's exactly what they are, a front company for the West, were implemented and foisted into power, by the likes of Cohen and Brzezinski and George Bush, the elder, to do exactly what they did over the next 27 years. They call it ethnic federalism. It's apartheid. When you create homelands based on ethnicity, that's exactly what happened in South Africa. I wouldn't call it's apartheid light, but it's actually apartheid period. So what they did was piece by piece, they conditioned Ethiopians to look at ethnicity above humanity. There's someone that I admire a lot by the name of Obang. He always says humanity above ethnicity. Well, TPLF did the opposite. So from the time you're born, with your name, your ethnic affiliation emblazoned on everything, to the time you die, you think of ethnicity. So what started off in 1991, Ethiopians still said Ethiopia first. By the time we're here now, it's ethnicity first, tribe first. And so what we're seeing today is a manifestation of that. But I'm going to get back to this shortly. Abiy Ahmed is not a hero in this either. Your initial assessments most likely were right. Abiy Ahmed was part of TPLF. So this guy that came out of nowhere, except he did not come out of nowhere. In a lot of ways, I call him the Obama of Ethiopia. Just the same way that Obama kind of bamboozled Americans into believing that he was changed when he was really Bush 2.0. Well, Abiy Ahmed is TPLF 2.0. So, I mean, I don't want to belabor the point. I want to let y'all get worded edgewise. But we had to, first and foremost, before we have an assessment of what is taking place, we had to know how do we get here and how we got here. Yeah. It starts, I want to delve into this a little bit later on as well. It started before 1991, but 1991 with the London Conference was a monumental occurrence, and that's a big part of how we got here as a country.
And then it was under that Tigrayan rule that Ethiopia invaded Somalia on behalf of the Americans in 2006, right? And that's right, kind correct. Of them being the puppet force. Okay.
Right. And also, under the same regime, there was a conflict between Eritrea and Ethiopia. under the TPLF. And they rebranded themselves. They call themselves EPR. I hate acronyms. Like, an acronym is just another way of hiding maliciousness. The Melissa already passed away. Then the new prime minister, meet the new king, same as the old king. And now we have Abiy again, meet the new king, same as the old king. And so this is where I diverge from most Ethiopians, most likely, because we've been the conventional wisdom says, pick a side. Either you're with Abiy or you're against him. Either with TPLF or you're against him. I'm just with the people. The people have been used for such a long time. And as much as I criticize Abiy Ahmed, as much as I criticize TPLF, who I do not criticize are Tagaru people, who I do not criticize are Amaras, who I do not criticize are Oromos. The people are hurting. It's like in America, you have these malicious parties that they kind of play on the pains of Democrats, of African Americans, of minorities, of women, and then you have Republicans that do the same thing, and they just bamboozling us. At the end of the day, if you go to DC, you'll see Republicans and Democrats hanging out together, partying together. Meanwhile, they have us fighting each other. So it's the same playbook that's been waged in Africa and within Ethiopia for such a long time, and now the chickens have come home to roost.
Can I ask real quick the division strategy to divide the people and label them with their tribe or ethnicity or whatever it's called?
Right.
And that was a strategy used by a Western-backed leader.
Right.
Now, we see that all the time. A lot of times it's like we want the resources, so we do this to other. Sometimes we regime change, otherwise we destabilize.
Right.
Some people call it balkanize. Get a country divided up into regions so that they can't, as a unified force, resist that. But it's usually, I guess, for different purposes. What was the purpose of dividing the country up in your view?
Well, I mean, so in 1990s, not too long after the TPLF took over, I was in college and I wrote a paper about colonization. I never thought about Ethiopia when I did that, because back then I used to say never colonized, proudly puff of my chest and say never colonized, right? I didn't realize that was coming for us. But what I wrote about specifically was South Africa and Rwanda. And there's a playbook to this. What you do is you elevate a minority class, you elevate them to power, and then you give them money, you give them guns, and you give them status. And it's not even, when I say them, it's just a tiny sliver within that tribe, because the vast majority of people within that tribe are suffering. But a large percentage of that group, even if they have nothing, at least we're not them. we have, at least we have status. At least we have fake privilege. So they will defend the indefensible, right? Now, what they do is then they pivot and they go to the out group, the marginalized, and they give them money, guns, almost to the parity of government or whoever's in the control at that time. And they give them grievance. They did this to you. They did this to you. So media is weaponized, weapon is given, and money is given to fund a cold war of sorts, a simmering conflict. Now, as long as the leader of the elevator group obeys, stays in his lane, like Gaddafi did for a while, then they're good, right? Nothing happens to them. But let them kind of stray a little too much. Let them talk about money, especially, or nationalizing resources. Oh, immediately a civil war breaks out. Almost exactly when these leaders start looking out for the interests of their people. A civil war breaks out, there's a coup d'etat. Now up comes a new group. The new marginalized group is now elevated. The one that were in charge are now back to the outcast, right? And it's rinse, repeat. It's the same thing, right? And so that's what happened in Ethiopia. In 1990, the marginalized group were the Tegarus. They were elevated to the leadership, and they were given status, guns, money, and as long as Meles Nawi did as he was told, they were good. 27 years, right? And to be honest, even right around the time that Meles Nawi passed away, he started kind of talking the language of Gaddafi at that time. Mysteriously, he had cancer. He died within a year. The predecessor, or I guess the person that was after him, comes into power, and he kind of goes back. He learns his lesson: be quiet and just do what the West tells you. And then what happens is around 2017, the TPLF, they just do too much. The people have had enough. So it's just unsustainable. There's going to be a revolution. So what do? You create a masterpiece like Obama was, right? Or the people in America have had enough of Bush. They were ready to turn on the whole thing. Something historic had to happen. They gave us Obama. Well, something historic had to happen to prevent Oromos and Amaras from kind of uniting and kind of demolishing the status quo. They gave us Abiy, Obama 2.0. So this is how colonization works. And now I can't even look and say, well, Ethiopia's never been colonized. We have, by ourselves. And it's been done so by weaponizing our leaders against us.
It's frustrating. Now, real quick, the resources that would be coveted in this country.
Sure.
The court. What I know, we have the whole issue of the dam, which
right.
It's the origin of the Nile, and in Ethiopia. So that's a big deal. Some people say water's going to be more valuable than oil, but minerals are a big thing right now. There's a lot of grabbing of land and countries and things like that with the aim of minerals. But what is it that they're after in Ethiopia?
Kyle, do you have any thoughts on this? I don't want to kind of monopolize that.
I guess, yeah. I mean, I would love to hear what your thoughts are on the dam. And just to put it in perspective, I think it will be, I don't know if the world's biggest dam by size, but hold like the world's like largest holding like pond from the reservoir. It's going to be absolutely massive. I think I've read a lot about it. I know there's going to be some people displaced by it, and there's like a little bit of an issue around that, but Sudan and Egypt are particularly throwing a fit about this, saying that if Ethiopia decides to fill it at like the fastest rate, it could suck up like a third or half of the water that makes, I don't know, Egypt may be like exaggerating that. It seems like a lot to me, but at the same time, I'm sure it will like have impacts. And, this is something that is an issue like around the Middle East, especially in Syria. Turkey has built so many dams as, creating less water flow. And so, I mean, it's a complicated like African issue, right? On what the hell to do with the Nile River. And but at the same time, I'm sure it's going to bring tons of power and electricity to very, very poor people in Ethiopia. And that could be like game changing to no understanding from somebody who's lived in like a house with air conditioning their whole life.
Correct.
I think that if I can just pitch in one thing that Issa Bloomy has talked about, it's the there are Gulf states who have ambitions and have plans for this region of Africa, to become a food basket, to be a place where there's a lot of agriculture and things like that. And so, I don't know what their hand is in this, but he talked a lot about that. I'll link that. I'll link that podcast in the show notes for anybody who wants to go listen to the details of what he said.
Yeah, I mean, Kyle, to what you're saying there. So there's things that are evident and then things that are hidden about this whole thing, right? So let's talk about the evident part. By the way, first and foremost, it's not really called the Nile River. That's just talk about appropriation.
I should have known that because I know what I've read on your blog. My bad.
No. You're good. Hey, so it's very hard to undo that which has been done to us through indoctrination, aka public education. So the Nile River is just made up terminology. It's like if I come into your house and rename your kids to whatever I decide to call it. The name is actually we call it the Abba Ghion, right? So that's why the Ghion Journal actually, how apropos, is named after that. And so the reason that that's significant in Genesis, in the Bible, there's 4 rivers mentioned in Genesis. There's the Pishon, which I have no idea where that's at. The second one is the Ghion. Then there's the Euphrates and Tigris. Mm-hmm. When these colonizers rename it to the Nile, it kind of washes away the significance of what Ethiopia represents, right? And this is how colonization works. You rename people, and then, like, for example, you know, I know it's gonna sound controversial with some. I don't identify with Black because that terminology, or label, whatever you want to call it, construct, was invented by racists, right? By slave traders. And it was imposed upon people from the continent that was actually once called Ethiopia to dehumanize us, right? We didn't call ourselves by these labels. Nobody, both of you are not white. I've never seen a purely white person in my life. That's a construct. And I'm not Black. We're people, we're human beings. And for me, the only color that matters is the bloodline, or as in that bloodline is going back to Adam and Eve, if you believe in God. But even if you don't, we have the same blood in us, you know? So for me, that's what matters. I don't believe in conformity or uniformity. We have our unique cultures. We should celebrate that. But there's no culture to be had by accepting a label that was invented by slave traders. So that's I just want to kind of get that out of the way. But beyond that, so the Ghion River, the reason that there's a lot of importance around that, you know, Ethiopia, that's one of Ethiopia's biggest natural resources. And countries have a right to develop their natural resources. Egypt had no problem developing the Nile Dam. They displaced all kinds of people when they built the Nile Dam. I think, in fact, I met somebody who told me that he was displaced by his own government in Egypt. So Egypt, they're a bunch of hypocrites. They need to tend to their own business and stop repressing and butchering their people instead of worrying about what Ethiopia is doing. And beyond that, you know, rational people can sit down at a table and say, okay, how can we fill this up slowly so that it does not impact the waterways? That could be had, but Egypt does not want that, because Egypt's contention is not about the water; it's about empowerment. As long as Ethiopia is weak, because Egypt is acting in accordance to their Western masters, they get all kinds of billions of dollars from America for a reason, right? And what the West cannot abide, is a rising Ethiopia, because that offers another way forward for the continent that got renamed to Africa. But that's another discussion for another time, right? So that's the reason why the colonial powers had to destroy Ethiopia, because when they defeated the Titans in 1896, Ethiopia became the beacon for oppressed people around the world. There's so many flags in the continent. I keep saying the continent. The continent that was once formerly called Ethiopia. They're all in the pattern of the red, green, yellow, red for a reason, because they were awed by the fact that Ethiopians were able to defeat the Titans in 1896. I think there's like 3 or 4 countries in South America. So what Ethiopia represents is an alternative to corporate capitalism, an alternative to colonization, of global oppression. You can't have that. You can't. So that's why they're coming after Ethiopia with a vengeance. So one, it's the Ghion River to make sure that we stay feeble, because if that gets developed the right way, then you're talking about people that can, you know, build up electricity. Then they can build up natural, you know, their local communities, and that's how you empower a country, by the way.
Self-sustaining electricity,
right?
Too.
Self-sustaining.
Not energy they have to buy from someone else. Yeah.
And that's the threat. And that exact. So as long as what these countries do, these so-called philanthropists, the devils, as far as I'm concerned, they cripple you, then they give you a crutch, right? Or another way of saying it is they give you a fish. They donate fish to you as they're emptying out the whole lake of fish, you know? So Ethiopia, if it had the right leader, which Abiy is not, because he's feeding into the whole quote unquote liberalization, which is theft of the people and shipping it overseas. He's no different than Meles Zenawi in that way. But if we had a leader that actually cared about the development of the people instead of developing skyscrapers, then maybe we could have actually a way forward. Right now, we don't. Instead, we fight each other, because when resources are scarce, when there's not enough money, not enough food, tribalism increases, and strife increases, and eventually bloodshed increases.
And then you can extract their stuff and elevate an elite and extract stuff and enrich a small part of the population, and over and over and over and over and over again. We see this.
Yeah. It's happening in America. That's exactly what's going on. Oh, wait, America's colonized. We're a colony of the British. It's been like this since 1812.
I mean, all right. So if we could, I guess, move on a little bit. I was just curious. So I guess a lot of the coverage that I see from Ethiopia that isn't just like, Reuters write-ups of like whatever, kind of like does this thing where there's no white hats, which is probably true. Like there's no like good guy, anybody you would like feel comfortable leaving with your kids for a weekend, right? But at the same time, it seems like everybody's doing the like both sides thing too, where it's just like everybody's bad, and that's like as detailed as they could get with it. And in a sense, I guess from looking at the reports, I saw, I think today they said it was like a Amara militia that committed war crimes in the Tigrayan region. I was actually looking up stuff for Somalia yesterday and noticed that they actually replaced and now named the biggest terrorist attack ever in Africa no longer as the 27 team Mogadishu bombing, but a 2020 I guess TPLF massacre of 1,100 people. And so, there's that. And then I think, I've read reports about the Eritrean army committing some pretty vicious war crimes, including mass rapes of Tigrayan people. And then less about the Ethiopian army, but I imagine that they're not much better than anybody else. But I'm just wondering if you kind of agree with like that everybody is bad, or if there's maybe some distinction that we could try to draw between the sides.
So these supposed free press, they have an agenda. In fact, I'm working on an article coming up shortly about CNN, and hopefully I'll have that published next week sometime. But their agenda, they're the mouthpiece of Western government. It's funny how, and they're, when they go through and detail these massacres, they never talk about the massacres that TPLF committed during the 27 years they were in power. They omit what happened during the Richa massacre or the genocide that happened in Anwak. So all of a sudden now they're shedding crocodile tears for Tigray when they have not been they have not been shedding any tears at all, while TPLF was butchering their way to power the whole time. And the reason that they're doing this now, again, is to create strife. The Western government's most powerful weapon is not the gun. It's the media. It's the media. And they deploy the media with vicious, lethality. And so you have the likes of CNN, MSNBC, AP, Reuters, all of them. They have an agenda. Their perspective is not to tell the truth. Like I've said, I've written articles in the past where I've criticized Abiy Ahmed. I'm no fan of his, but I've also said when TPLF, it was TPLF. Let's keep in mind, it was the TPLF that attacked on November 4th. They attacked in the dead of night and killed hundreds of Ethiopian soldiers. And then all of a sudden they say, oh, I can't believe we were being attacked. Imagine what America would do. If, let's say, for example, Mexico attacked Houston, killed hundreds of American soldiers, and then they withdrew, and then they started lobbing missiles into Texas and into Louisiana and to California. What would America do? Mexico would be leveled. There would be what did America do in Iraq when 9/11 happened? Well, every day TPLF was creating a mini 9/11. And so they start off with a 9/11 of their own on November 4th, 2020. But again, this is the disingenuous nature of the supposed free press. They don't talk about this because their intention is to create strife for two reasons. One, that's what their corporate masters want them to do because that's how you make money. And two, that's what the Western governments want them to do because that's how you create strife. And as long as there's strife in Africa, and as long as we remain in debt and bondage, And I'm not, by the way, I don't mean to just say the West. It's just outside forces, because I don't mean to make it seem like Russia's any better or China is just as malicious. What they're doing by indenturing Africa with debt, making it seem like they're hands off, when really the minute that if an Ethiopian, or an African government does not do what pleases China, they pull their investments. So they're weaponizing investments, just like the West is. They're just doing it in different ways. So here's what we need. I keep saying community empowerment. Well, it also has to be country empowerment. This globalization scheme is not working. It's not working. Countries need to be able to develop their own economies and be independent from this global monetary system of theft.
Yeah. This is kind of a good opportunity to talk about the foreign influences. I don't know how cut and dry that is, but who's meddling here, who's backing, who has taken a side, and do you think that their goal is to undermine the current government, to bring the TPLF faction back into power? Is there any of that going on, or?
Yeah.
Is it a proxy war? Sometimes these things are in some ways proxy wars.
So Joe Biden, when he went to the United Nations, he gave a speech that was effectively a declaration of war against Ethiopia. And the way that these wars happen, by the way, it's never really a direct attack. It's through proxy. And the proxy in this case was Egypt. Egypt has been getting billions of dollars. And then Egypt, and in return, they kind of do a proxy war of their own by funding these hateful and extremist elements like OLF, TPLF. They pit people against each other, and so sadly, Ethiopians have fed into this. Instead of realizing that we're literally, you have governments, media, NGOs, like, so I call them human rights wash instead of watch. Because the leader, I forgot his name, I think his name is Jerry, was literally like propagandizing on behalf of TPLF. And what TPLF has done over the years, over 27 years, is they've established a lot of connections. Relationship building is their expertise. So what you do is you establish a relationship. You don't ask for too much. You give money. TPLF has given lots of money over the years. One of the biggest, I forgot the name of the law firm or the lobbying firm here in DC. The name escapes me, but they give. I mean, they give all kinds of money, and the minute that they want it, they call in their. It's called calling in your chits. Yeah. They call the chits in and they say, "Hey, we need this favor," and human beings are susceptible to that level of relationship. You befriend somebody, especially somebody that gives you money. You're going to tell the story. You sing the way that the maestro is telling you to sing, and so. That's what TPLF has done. And so these so-called journalists, they're propagandists as far as I'm concerned. They're not really seeking truth. They're this yellow journalism at its highest when it comes to what's going on in Ethiopia.
Plus, you can't really get into. Aren't communications cut off too? Yeah. And no journalists can really get in there. Right, is that true? Right? So. Like in Syria, that happened where in certain areas, the only information coming out of there was, from the moderate rebels, if you will, and
I did
heavily propagandized. Sorry,
I did see that they, at least the AP is saying that one of their freelance journalists was arrested by the Ethiopian government. And, this is one of those cases where I never support arresting a journalist or anything like that. But as you're talking about, the information coming out of Ethiopia is so limited and the narrative is so powerful from just a few handful of sources. If they really feel like this person is reporting like some extremely misleading information, I mean, that could be a real problem created. I was curious though, you mentioned that there's some TPLF lobbying in the US. Is there like at all an Ethiopia lobby? Is there, I guess I personally, as far as I know, I've never met anybody that's actually from Ethiopia. So I'm not sure how much of a Ethiopian community there is in the United States or where it is, if it's here. And if there's any lobbying power, or like there's somebody in Congress who takes this up as a main issue or something.
Yeah, I mean, there is so the TPLF lobbying by far exceeds anything that but see, I had to pause on that too, because again, for me, I don't really make a distinction between TPLF and Abiy Ahmed. They behind the scene, they're working together. This is how it always works. You have these leaders, this opposition faction. Again, I'll refer you to Republicans and Democrats, right? They pretend to be fighting in front of the TV. Behind the scenes, this is why they went after Julian Assange. He was exposing the duplicity of this whole thing, right? If you look at some of his Cablegate and all that kind of stuff, you see, and these dispatches, that these folks are actually best friends, So Abiy Ahmed in that same way. So, if Abiy Ahmed is not really lobbying Congress, I think it's on purpose. I believe his aim is to radicalize Amaras and Oromos against Tagaros. And TPLF's main job is to radicalize Tagaros against Amaras. And to be honest with you, actually, now Oromos are kind of, at least the extremist element, are going towards more of the Tagaro side of the equation, or the TPLF side of the equation. This is a recipe for a Rwanda 2.0. And back in the day, when Ethiopia was attacked by Italy, for example, we would have these patriotic songs. And I mean, if you hear it, it makes you just want to, it's like listening to Eye of the Tiger. It just makes you get all in, These songs are now being sung so that we could kill each other. This is how far down the rabbit hole that we've come. And at the forefront are Debretsion, who's the TPLF's main guy, and Abiy Ahmed. This is exactly what they're meant to be doing. And so they're doing it to us. And sadly, people are not realizing this, And by the way, one additional thing. I used to be in an organization called Omega Psi Phi. It's rooted in Masonry. And most people know, I think every American president was a Mason. All of them. So this idea that there's free elections and all that, it's just a farce. You and I have a better chance of tap dancing on Mars than we do becoming president of America. You have to be on the inside of club. Well, Abiy Ahmed is a Mason too. Haile Selassie was a Mason too. All these leaders are on this secret society insider club. We're not George Carlin once said, "It's a big club, you ain't in it." Well, this one is more like a big cult, and we're not in it. And until we recognize that as the bottom 99%, or whatever you want to call us, humanity versus whatever, then we're gonna keep getting played. By people that have 20-year vision will always beat people that react day to day.
You say that there's potential genocides or factional massacres, things like that. And the reason why I reached out to you when I did was when Samantha Power stood up and said, it's all everything's on the table. And she started sounding like she did when she pushed to do a no-fly zone, to do another one of the humanitarian interventions in Libya, and we can see what happened there. Right. And there are a number of people who are comparing this situation to Libya. So it set off my alarm bells, right? But it also so happens her background, or I guess when she really kind of burst onto the scene, was when she wrote a book on genocides, and she lectured the world about early intervention too. And she pointed out, fingered the people who could have stepped in and prevented that and didn't. And so I guess her mission in life is to never let that happen again, by deploying whatever means that she has. And she has a lot of influence. And now before she was just, I think she initially was an advisor, and then she became the ambassador to the UN. But now she's heading up US Aid, which is basically it's a front organization for the intelligence mafia.
Right.
The intelligence. Well, I don't have a good word for it yet, because it's not just the CIA, right, anymore. There's whole privatization. It's a whole network. Intelligence. Let's just call it a network. I'll be kind. And so I don't think she tends to bluff about things like this. I haven't seen her, bluster about intervention before and then not do everything in her power to do it. So I don't know, you've given me a lot of food for thought that you're saying.
Well,
that,
I mean,
because, oh, look how this is all playing out. Now we have,
right.
Anyway,
Yeah.
So I didn't really ask a question, but just what do you think about that?
Samantha Power is lecturing people about genocide. It's like Jim Jones speaking against red Kool-Aid cups. This is outrageous. She's the main one. She should know. She's the expert. If she wants to stop genocide, just get off the stage. After what she did in Libya, the thing about these people, and I don't mean to sound crass about this. This is like when Bill Gates said that he's worried about, ending child hunger, and yet he's making his billions of dollars the way that he is. It's almost like the devil comes at you and sells you the complete opposite of what he is. And this is what she's doing. Hillary Clinton pretending to care about Haiti. Just outrageous. So Samantha Powers has no credibility. We need to stop listening to her. But except we can't, because she's being propped up by the media all the time. So this is, again, it goes back to the power of the media. The same war criminals are hired by MSNBC, CNN, Fox News to and they recycle them. They kind of give them a PR re-imaging. And now, people that the left used to hate, they love them now because, well, at least they're not against. It's just, I don't know. It's very disheartening when you look at it, to be honest with you.
It's very frustrating.
And just
What do you
add
think,
about
Kyle?
Sam Power.
Oh yeah.
So let me talk about this lady, because I hate her.
Yeah.
So Sam Power is head of USAID, and right now the biggest humanitarian crises on the planet are probably Yemen, and then a major growing one in Afghanistan, which she has completely wiped her hands of because all she cares about is PR image, and USAID will not get involved in Afghanistan. For a minute, it looked like she had her eyes set on Haiti, but it seems that they've moved on from that. And I know USAID is playing a big role right now in the vaccine distribution, so I'm sure a lot of her attention is paid to that. But Ethiopia seems to be where she has her eye on. There's been several USAID facilities and cargo shipments raided, quote unquote, in Ethiopia, mainly by Tigrayan forces. So you have to wonder what actually that it maybe they're just stealing food. I don't know, but maybe there could be that, they could have known there was something else in those bags or those trucks or something like that. But also she has specifically identified that she worries that the language from the Ethiopian government is going to spark a genocide. And so she has her eyes completely set on Ethiopia. When Biden took office, I was very worried about a new intervention in Africa, particularly looking at the map of the world and where you could possibly intervene. I think the African countries probably present better opportunity to have a intervention you could spin as a success, no matter how bad it is actually for the people there. And I think Sam Power is trying to bolster her image, and I think she has her eyes set on Ethiopia to do that.
You think she's going to come in on the side of TPLF, or has she? So she has been pretty explicit about that.
It's not even close.
So regime change or what?
I mean, I'm not sure what the goal is, because
Libya was a regime change operation framed as a humanitarian intervention.
No, right. I think what they want is ultimately to balkanize Ethiopia, right? You create Oromia, Amaristan, and Greater Tigray, right? And when you do that, you shatter a country. Earlier I said that there's an evident and a hidden. There's a hidden aspect to Ethiopia. Like Ethiopia is very, very, it's a significant country in terms of the Bible. I mentioned that the Ghion River is the second river mentioned in the Bible. Well, throughout the Bible, it keeps mentioning Ethiopia a litany of times. the intersection of all three major faiths is Ethiopia. Of course, Judaism was the first religion really that was established there back during Queen Sheba and King Solomon. In fact, she had a child with King Solomon and brought him back. The first king of Ethiopia was King Menelik the first. My ancestor, Teodrose the second. He was the king of Ethiopia in 1856, in the 1850s. He traces his ancestry directly back to Queen Sheba and Solomon, and by extension, King David and Bathsheba. That's why all the kings of Ethiopia and queens were called the tribe of Judah, right? This is the hidden part. And so what Menelik the first did is that he relocated the Ark of the Covenant from, according to the story that I know, when Solomon kind of started messing up, cavorting too much with the I guess we want to call them, I don't know, ungodly people. The punishment, the story goes, is that the Ark of the Covenant was taken from Israel and relocated to Ethiopia. To this day, there's a monastery in the northern part of Ethiopia where one priest, right, oversees the Ark of the Covenant. And there has been many attempts to get to that location, and they can't. I don't know. It's almost like there's an invisible army guarding that. One monk guarding something that's covered up by so many people, but yet they have not been able to get it. And so I think maybe that could be the hidden reason why. Because if you fracture Ethiopia in so many different ways, maybe the thinking goes, well, we could get what we want. And so, there's a lot of cross sections, and like I said, Ethiopia is like not only the birthplace of not birthplace, but the locus for Judaism. Christianity was founded there. 280 years before Constantine kind of co-opted Christianity, Ethiopians had adopted Christianity. And then when the Prophet Muhammad was being persecuted, he sent his emissaries to Ethiopia for safe harbor. So, all three religions intersected Ethiopia. And so you have a lot of these, as I mentioned earlier, Masonic entities that are trying to get at this. So there's things that are happening surface level, and then there's stuff that's happening beneath the surface that we're not really paying attention to.
Yeah, I mean, within any conflict, or strategy or plot, often you see other people who hop on board for, their own reasons. Can we talk a little bit? I watched some videos, the one that you had sent me, and can we talk a little bit about the diaspora, the Ethiopian diaspora here in the United States? Maybe it's a broader alliance. I don't know if it's where the activism is coming from. I think they have a hashtag. I believe there was a fairly big protest, and what is the hashtag that they're using?
They're using no more as the hashtag.
Yeah. Can you talk about their perspective a little bit? Because I was surprised by it, but I don't know enough. So, I think it's to take down the TPLF, right? And just to take that faction out of the picture so that the country can make progress under the current government. Is that their position roughly?
Yeah, except I'm not saying this to be judgmental.
Or is it even uniform, or is it, I'm not saying it's monolith either. So.
Yeah, I think within the faction that says no more, for example, their position is very clear. They don't want TPLF there anymore, and neither do I. But I think it's misguided because they stopped there. TPLF is not the disease; they're the symptom. Mm-hmm. And this is like I said, for me, no different than Abiy Ahmed. And so this is how colonization works. You radicalize people to go into their defensive corners based on ethnic lines. And, if you're saying no more to an ethnic faction and not realizing that that ethnic faction is part of a broader, agenda to fracture a country, then you're actually playing into the very same thing that you think that you're protesting against. And for me, on a personal level, I've been saying for a long time, protesting is for defeated people. Our ancestors, when the Italians invaded, did not protest. You know, they had the reason that, by the way, the reason that we were able to defeat the Italians, it wasn't really the gun, it was the vision of Ta'aitu, Queen Ta'aitu, the vision of King Menelik II. And by the way, when the word Atse, like Atse Teodrose, it means vision. So the leaders of a country have to have a vision. And so now we're being led by visionless people up to a point. And so just willy-nilly protesting every 2 seconds, who's going to listen to us? America's not going to listen to us. They're doing this. They're the ones that's kind of, agitating and prodding and provoking all these things. So you protesting to them? Good luck. You protesting to CNN? Good luck. So the key is not to protest, right? It's to have a vision. And that vision, for me, entails making sure that the plight of Ethiopians is understood not just by Ethiopians, but by all. It's all about weaving. At the end of the day, the media is so powerful because of narrative. So if people understand that the plight of Ethiopia is directly related to the plight of Americans, that the suffering that's taking place in Ethiopia is a direct byproduct of the suffering, the economic disparity that's taking place here in America, as a homeless child in Ethiopia suffers, a homeless child here in Atlanta suffers. You start weaving these factual narratives, then you have a chance of building a consensus, because now people are not looking at Ethiopia saying, why do I care? They're saying, oh, I care because this is the same thing is happening to me. But we're not able to articulate that message. One of the things that I was not trying to step on the messaging, but like, for example, Bob Marley had a song called War No More, right? So if that hashtag was War No More, and then you say, okay, Bob Marley's song, African Americans, War No More. You don't want the war that's taking place, economic war against you. War No More. Mexicans, you don't feel like you're being valued in America for your contributions. War. So you start tying in their narrative that way. Who's very good at doing this? TPLF. I've actually listened to they used to have meetings on Clubhouse, and I'll just sit there and just listen. They go messaging, hashtags, when to do it, make sure that you do it. You have time in between. Man, it's very efficient and effective the way that they do it. But again, if you're just willy-nilly protesting without necessarily having a coherent vision, you're going to keep getting defeated by people who have a vision. TPLF, say what you will about them, they have a vision, and they're carrying that out. That's how they're able to wage such an effective media campaign. And sadly, that vision was actually kind of fed to them in London. They were trained to do this over years, and now we're kind of seeing the manifestation of it. And so I'm hoping that at some point we stop protesting and actually, like for me, pick up a pen. I forgot who said it. To pick up a pen is to declare war, or something like that. Pick up a right in a way that connects the dots for everyone. That's how you defeat colonization.
Yeah, and I mean, once you understand the truth of something, it's really kind of hard to undo that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I do agree with you on that. Well, we've already kept you for almost an hour, so probably should consider wrapping up. I chose not to go into a bonus question because I just think it's better to keep this whole interview public and main. And but I hope that you'll come back and talk to us again, because your kind of insights are really valuable.
Thank you.
Anything else, Kyle? You may have some more things you want to touch on, and also Teodrose, please, if there's anything you haven't been able to say, please do that too.
If I just have one last question, I'm just curious as to what the, I guess, situation comparatively, like living standards are in Ethiopia right now, if they're declining or on the rise. I noticed, or at least saw a lot of reports of it not just being like the Ethiopian army, but also like ethnic militias, mainly comprised of like young men going out and engaging in some of the fighting. And when you have that happen, at least in other areas of the world, it tends to get really, really nasty and brutal. These aren't trained fighters in any way. These are just, kids they give, not kids, but, young men they give guns to. Yeah. And, just say, go kill these people, and bad shit happens when that happens. And it seems like, the worse the economic opportunities are, the more you're going to have the young men willing to, do that. Because if that's the only way to feed your family, then you give me the gun, right? If it's, that versus watching your kids go hungry, I kind of get that. I also recently there's a huge locust swarm in the Horn of Africa, and I know really devastated parts of Kenya, and I know Ethiopia, it actually grows food, so I'm not sure if that had any impact, but just in general, it is like there any good standard of living, or is it kind of declining?
The life for the top 1% has been very good for them. And I think it was Sammy that said, Sammy Sosa, America's been very good to me. Well, colonization or globalization, whatever you want to call it, has been very good to the top 1%. And that cuts across all ethnic lines. Even during the days of TPLF, you had Amara businessmen that were doing very good. You had Omo businessmen that were, and I'm not anti-business, by the way. I'm just anti-gluttony, So for these gluttonous people, they're living large, they're talking about like sultans don't live as good as some Ethiopians living back in Ethiopia, And there was one guy I was interviewing. He said they're gluttony so much that even though they're like effectively billionaires, whatever they are, I mean, by the standards of Ethiopia, they might as well be Jeff Bezos. That even though they have that much money, that they would take the donated food and give it to their as feed for their animals. That's what money does. You're taking money from the poor and giving it to animals. So, how do you gauge decline? If you're a billionaire and you lose $100 million, does that really decline? For the life of the average Ethiopian, the bottom 95, whatever you want to, I don't know what exactly the threshold is. There is no decline. There's no incline. There's just suffering, and life is getting harder and harder by the day because inflation, which is the lethal killer, is just whatever wealth has been built up by a few people outside of that 1% club, even that's being eaten up now. It sounds like America, doesn't it? So yeah, there's what you said, by the way, people turn to guns because they're being paid. It's not just that. When there's this level of disparity and hopelessness, people kind of revert back to their animal nature. This is what happens all the time. You take away the hope from people. You take away the ability to kind of provide for their own families, and their family members die. I mean, this is why people turn towards terrorism in certain parts of the country or the world. So this is just human nature. You rob people of their dignity, of their ability to feed their kids, and you just imbue them with hopelessness. They don't hate the people that are doing this to them because they can't see them. They hate people that's next to them. And so they end up killing each other over this. And so, it's a sad byproduct of this new world order globalization where the fourth industrial revolution promises liberation by putting you in prison of staying at home, UBI, universal basic income, for doing nothing, and see how that works out for everyone.
Yeah. Anyway, anything else you'd like to talk about before we wrap up?
Yeah, so kind of breaking news of sorts, I guess. So we're kind of the Ghion Journal has been around for the past 6 years. It's coming to an end, to be honest with you. I'm kind of announcing that, that we're gonna I'm gonna kind of transition. Well, first I'm gonna kind of just lay low for a bit and just ponder the next steps. It's even the word Ghion, right? The Ghion River in Ethiopia, they say it takes life and gives life, right? And so my writing has been so focused on politics and doing so in a way where I'm kind of raging against the machine. What I've realized over the years is that by raging against the machine, I'm empowering this very same machine I'm kind of raging against. So I'm going to just kind of ponder and reflect about what is the best way to stand up for justice? What is the best way to unite people? Is it by raging against the machine, or is it by kind of building a new machine that's just, so that I'm just on that quest for understanding. So part of that quest, I think, I'm going to probably write the last article for the Ghion Journal tomorrow, and then see what happens after that. So yeah, I guess you could say this is the goodbye until the next hello, which whatever the iteration of Teodrose is going to be.
Will you still be available? Can we still follow your work on Twitter? To be able to just how to stay in touch.
Yeah.
Is that the best way?
Yeah. So it's still my Twitter account is Teodrose, Teodrose, and then number 2. Like I said, I might lay low for like just this whole contemplative moment, especially during the holiday season coming up. And then I'll eventually resurface. I love writing too much. I can't give that up. So I'll be here.
Well, I really appreciate the time that you've spent. And Kyle, thanks so much. It's always great to co-host with you. And when you become active again, we'd love to talk to you again about this.
Definitely. Yeah, keep in touch, Kyle. I'm not sure if you're following me on social media, but if you're not, let's link up.
I definitely will. Yeah.
I hope I didn't monopolize the microphone too much.
No, not at all. No.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I enjoyed it. I really do. I mean, this is for me that Kyle, you're very informed about what's going on in Ethiopia. And I appreciate that about you. It's very hard to decipher truth apart from lies. Very hard, because most of the information that we're getting is just propaganda. And so it helps to be kind of on the inside. But even on the inside, you kind of had to be realize exactly how the game was being played, or else the game will play you. So, it's just we were all kind of on a search for truth, I guess, in that way.
Definitely.
Very much. Thanks again. Appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone. Have a blessed night.
Thanks for listening. Special thanks to Teodrose Fikremariam, and a special thanks to Kyle for co-hosting this Swapcast. Follow Teodrose on Twitter at Teodrose3, and find his work at the Ghion Journal and on their YouTube channel. Follow Kyle at Kyle Anzalone _ and at the Conflicts of Interest podcast. This is an independent podcast, and in this age of censorship, your support is more important than ever. Please go to the website aroundtheempire.com to find the various ways that you can get access to the bonus content and support the show. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and leave reviews. Also follow on Twitter at Around the Empire. Join us on Telegram, t.me/aroundtheempire, and we'll see you next time. Have a great holiday, everyone.